The snow came sideways across the ridge, and Dory Voss knew from the way it moved that it would not stop before morning. She pulled the shutters tight against the frame and wedged a rag into the gap where the wind always crept through. The cabin was small, with 4 walls of pine, a stove that ate wood faster than she could split it, and a loft where she slept under every quilt she owned. Outside, the wind screamed. She had been alone on the homestead since October, when her father's cough finally carried him off. He had died in the chair by the stove, and she had buried him behind the barn where the soil was soft enough to dig. The nearest neighbor was 2 miles down the valley, and the snow had already closed the path twice since November. Dory was 24 years old, capable with an axe, and frightened in ways she would never have admitted to another living soul. She was filling the stove when she heard a howl. It was not a sound she expected, not in a blizzard, not at this hour. She took the lantern from the hook and opened the door against the wind. The cold hit her like a brick wall. Through the swirling white, she saw the shape of a wolf standing at the edge of the yard, its head low. Why would a lone wolf be out in weather like this? And why would he be in proximity to her homestead? Dory thought nervously. She set the lantern on the porch rail and waded through the drifts. The wolf did not move when she spoke to him. She brushed snow from his fur and found his coat was crusted with ice. She dragged him across the yard, through the door, and onto the floor beside the stove. His name, she would learn later, was Leonardo Vance. He was the Alpha King of Destin who had been caught by the storm while crossing the divide. His body was stiff, and he let out a small sigh when she placed him by the stove. Dory wrapped him in wool. She heated water and pressed warm cloths against his paws and chest. She talked to him the way she talked to animals when they were hurt, low and steady, telling him things that did not matter just to keep the sound going. He woke up sometime before dawn. His eyes were gray and confused, and the first thing he did was shift back to human and ask where he was. Dory told him. Leonardo tried to sit up and could not. She told him to lie still. He looked at her for a long moment, then closed his eyes and obeyed. The storm lasted days. During that time, Dory learned that Leonardo was from the Destin territory. He strayed from his pack during a training exercise and got lost. He didn't dare tell her the truth. He was at her mercy and did not trust her yet. He learned that Dory had buried her father only months ago, that the roof leaked over the loft when the snow melted, and that she had little money and a milk cow and not much else to see her through until spring. He was a quiet man, not given to unnecessary words. She appreciated that. He ate what she cooked without complaint and thanked her each time as though the meal were something remarkable. When his strength returned, he fixed the shutter she could not reach and repaired the wall behind the stove where the wood had crumbled. He did these things without being asked, and she let him without protest, and something settled between them that was more comfortable than anything she had known with another person. In the evenings, they sat on opposite sides of the stove and listened to the wind. Leonardo sat in the stillness, as if experiencing peace for the first time and wanting to savor it. Dory mended clothing or read from the single book she owned. They did not speak much during these hours, but the silence between them was not the silence of strangers. It was the silence of 2 people who had each been alone long enough to know the difference between solitude and companionship. On the 3rd evening, near midnight, Leonardo looked up and found her watching him. Neither of them said anything. She went back to her book, and the stove ticked and settled, and the storm pressed against the walls like something trying to get in. But he felt something, a feeling that had initially steered him in her direction. The next morning, the sky cleared. The snow lay in great white drifts that buried the fence posts and turned the valley into something unrecognizable. Leonardo stood on the porch and looked at it for a long time. Then he went outside. Dory watched from the doorway. She did not ask him to stay. She had learned a long time ago that asking for things only made it worse when they were refused. He looked at her with those gray eyes, and she could see that he was working something out behind them. Some calculation she was not part of. "I have business in Destin," he said. "I know," she said. "The valley will be clear by now." He stood there another moment. Then he shifted into a majestic black wolf and ran toward the valley without looking back. Dory went inside and closed the door. She sat in her father's chair and did not cry because crying was a luxury she could not afford. She had known him 4 days, and that was not enough time to earn the right to grieve his leaving. But the cabin felt different after he was gone. The shutter he had fixed no longer rattled, and the wall behind the stove held the heat the way it should. These were small repairs, small kindnesses, but they lingered in her home like handprints she could not wash away. She caught herself looking at the chair where he had sat, and she made herself stop, because that way lay a kind of foolishness she could not afford. Winter continued on. January was brutal and February was worse. The milk cow went dry and Dory lived on beans and cornmeal and the venison she had smoked in the fall. She patched the roof when the thaw came in March, standing on a ladder her father had built, hammering tin over the leaks while the snow melt ran down her arms. She split wood until her hands bled and her shoulders ached, and she fell asleep each night before she could think about being lonely. The homestead required every hour she had, and she gave them without resentment because the land was the only thing that had never left her. April came softly. The snow retreated up the ridgelines, and the meadow below the cabin turned green in patches. Dory found wild flowers along the creek, small purple ones whose names she did not know. She picked a handful and put them in a jar on the table. And for the first time since October, the cabin felt less like a place where someone had died and more like a place where someone was living. She was mending a harness in the barn on a Thursday afternoon when she heard hoofbeats on the valley road. She stepped out and shaded her eyes against the late sun. A rider was coming up the track leading a horse behind him. The lead horse was a chestnut mare with a blaze face, and the horse behind it was a sturdy bay gelding with a pack saddle loaded high. Leonardo Vance stopped at the yard gate. He looked different than she remembered, stronger, tanned from the sun, but his eyes were the same gray and steady and working something out. "I brought you a horse," he said. Dory looked at the bay gelding. It was a good horse, well-muscled, with calm eyes and clean legs. The pack saddle was loaded with supplies: flour, salt, coffee, sugar, and a set of tools in a canvas roll. She looked at all of it, and then looked at him. "I cannot pay for a horse and the supplies," she said. "I did not ask you to pay," he said matter-of-factly. "Why would I not pay for it?" He dismounted and stood holding the reins. He was taller than she remembered. He looked at the cabin, at the barn, at the fence she had repaired with wire and stubbornness. He looked at the tin patches on the roof. "You saved my life," he said. "I do not forget that. I gave you a floor to lie on and some warm water. That is not the same as saving a life. It is exactly the same." They stood in the yard looking at each other while the horses shifted and the creek made a bubbling sound. Dory felt something open in her chest that she had spent the entire winter keeping closed. "I do not need charity," she said, because it was the only defense she had left. "It is not charity," Leonardo said. "It is a man bringing a horse to a woman whose homestead needs one, and if she will let him, he would like to stay and help with the fencing. I noticed in January that your south fence was leaning. You noticed that during a blizzard? I notice things." She almost smiled. She could feel it pulling at the corners of her mouth, and she fought it because smiling at him felt like agreeing to something she had not yet decided on. "The south fence is not just leaning," she said. "It is flat. Then I had better stay more than a day. Let us know what you think about our story, and if you enjoy it, click subscribe so you'll receive notifications when a new audio from Alpha Love Stories Original gets uploaded." Now back to the story. He stayed more than a day. He stayed a week and then 2 weeks, and then the week stopped being something either of them counted. He rebuilt the south fence with posts he cut from the timber above the meadow. He repaired the barn door that had sagged on its hinges since before her father died. He repaired the entire north wall of the cabin and built a proper shelf for the kitchen that Dory had been wanting for years. She cooked for him, and he ate, and they sat on the porch in the evenings while the light faded over the valley. He told her about the places he had been, the towns and trails and high passes, and she told him about the homestead, the seasons, and the way the elk came down to the meadow in September. They talked the way people talk when they have decided to trust each other, but have not yet said so aloud. Dory's neighbor, Frank, rode up in May to check on her as he did every spring. He found the fences mended, the barn repaired, a new horse in the corral, and a man sitting on the porch oiling a saddle. Frank looked at Dory, and she looked back at him with an expression that did not invite questions. Frank tipped his hat and left. In the weeks that followed, Leonardo proved himself as steady as the mountains that ringed the valley. He dug a new root cellar behind the cabin, lining it with flat stones from the creek bed so the walls would hold through the thaw. He cleared the irrigation ditch that fed the kitchen garden, pulling out deadfall and silt until the water ran clear and strong. Dory planted beans and squash and a row of sunflowers along the south side of the cabin, and Leonardo built a low fence of woven willow to keep the deer from the seedlings. They worked from dawn until the light was gone, and the homestead began to look the way her father had always intended it to look, prosperous and alive. The talk started in town, as talk always does when a woman is alone on a homestead with a man who was not her husband and not her kin. The postmaster mentioned it to the minister's wife, who mentioned it to the women's auxiliary, who discussed it over tea and cake with the gravity of a court proceeding. None of them had met Dory more than twice, and none of them had ever ridden to see if she was alive during the winter, but they had opinions nonetheless. Dory heard about the talk when she went to town for supplies in June. Mrs. Peaton at the general store said nothing directly, but said everything with her eyebrows and her silence. The minister's wife, Mrs. Alcott, was more forthcoming. A king should be more careful of his reputation, Mrs. Alcott said, folding her hands the way she did when she was about to say something she believed was charitable. King? Dory questioned. Alone with a king who hasn't made a mate claim says little to your character. Dory's mind was spinning. There was no indication or mention he was a king. She composed herself. There's nothing to claim. He is helping me repair my homestead, which no one in this town offered to do when my father died. Mrs. Alcott's mouth thinned. I am only thinking of your welfare. Then you might have thought of it in December when I was snowed in with very little money and a dry cow. She bought her supplies and rode home and said nothing to Leonardo about the conversation. But that night she sat on the porch longer than usual, and when he asked if something was wrong, she told him. She told him all of it. The eyebrows, the silence, Mrs. Alcott's charitable concern, and the fact he is the Alpha King of Destin. And when she finished, Leonardo was quiet for a long time. Do you want me to leave? He asked. I do not care about talk. But how could you not tell me you are a king? Are you really the king? How can you be here for weeks on end, leave your palace, and do all this work for me? When will this so-called repayment be done? Leonardo felt almost hurt. Yes, I am king of the destined territory. This is not repayment. While I was in your cabin, you treated me like a normal wolf. You didn't try to impress me, tell me things because you thought that was what I wanted to hear. You treated me like you would treat anyone else. I didn't mean to withhold anything from you, but I knew if I was forthright, you would have treated me differently. I made arrangements for my beta to handle things while I am away. No one knew I was here, not until Frank recognized me. Dory stared at him. He was right. If she knew he was the king, she would have been terrified of treating him improperly and the consequences of a wrong move. She also wouldn't have spoken to him so freely. I do understand your concern, Your Majesty. Don't call me that. To you, I am Leonardo. Nothing's changed between us. I still want to be here, to be with you. It's not only that you brought a peaceful calm to my life, you have brought me back to life. For the longest time, I only did what was necessary as a king. But now I feel hopeful. I feel excited to get up each day. And that is because of you. I don't know if you felt it, but I feel the bond. I knew it was real on the third night. I believe you did as well. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't any longer. That is why I came back. Each day it gets stronger. It gets harder to be away from you. Dory did feel something, but now she feels foolish. She can't be bonded with a king. How did this happen? She was living a quiet life, minding her own business, and a king who almost died on her homestead wants to be her mate. Dory looked at the valley and the light on the mountains and the man who had come back. Not because he owed her something, but because he wanted to be close to her. He never pressured her. He never forced her. He could have commanded it, but he didn't. "I don't want you to leave." She was honest. "But I don't know how this will work. What we are doing can't continue. You have responsibilities to the kingdom that do not include me." He looked at her with reassuring eyes. "My responsibilities do include you. You are my mate, and if you will have me, I will provide more than what I have given you at your homestead. The entire territory will be yours." Dory's eyes widened. The thought overwhelmed her. "I do not know how to be a queen. I don't even know how to engage with people. That will be learned in time. There's no rush. When I announce the claim, everyone will accept you. No one will speak ill of you. No one will disrespect you." Dory was afraid, but she couldn't let him leave her life. She had grown to care for him. She enjoyed spending her days working by his side. Now she will still be by his side, only in a different role. "What's next?" she asked. "Next, we go to bed in our corners of the home. When I wake, I'll tend to the animals and you will make coffee. We will go on about our day like we have been, and when and if you're ready, we can plan a trip to my castle. We can spend a couple of days there, allowing you to experience everything. But I want you to choose it." He had a way of making things seem easy. Taking care of the property, providing resources, and now introducing her to a new lifestyle. "I don't see how I could decline. You have provided more for me than anyone ever has, and I'm not talking only about the repairs and the supplies. You have been there for me when no one else has. When my father passed, I really didn't know how I would survive. You gave me hope, but not only that, I see that you care for me. You care for my well-being and my safety. I have grown to care for you. I think I would like to talk about a trip in the future." Leonardo could not contain his joy. A smile quickly crossed his lips. "It would be my honor to discuss a trip with you. Just let me know when you're ready." Dory's face softened and she smiled. "I think I would like to sit outside with you a little longer if you're up for it." Her eyes twinkled in the moonlight. "I am always up for it, Dory." "Anything for you," he said, as he settled in the chair beside her. Thanks for listening. If we can do anything better, let us know in the comments and click subscribe so we can continue to offer audio stories from Alpha Love Stories Original.